Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
I ain't scared of you motherfuckers.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. So listen responsibly.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only DJ Ice, Louisville's coldest DJ.
Good evening. Welcome to Conscious Fever here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host. Thanks for joining us tonight here at, should be a clock up there at 9 something. This is Thursday night here in Louisville, Kentucky, rainy Thursday night. But we are going to talk about how good I look on these monitors tonight. And in addition to that, we're going to talk about affirmative action and what the Supreme Court did today. But there's actually a twist to this. The Supreme Court really did not kill affirmative action, but we're going to talk a little bit more about it. I'm Carl Price. This is Conscious Fever on Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
I have wept and I have fallen. Don't you worry about me, 'cause I stood up, yes I have grown. The pain has set me free. Broken record in my head.
Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Yes, I was trying to figure out who that guy was in that gold jacket. Remember, I told y'all that I'm all over these monitors, so that's what we're going to talk about. Me looking good in these monitors tonight, and after me looking good in these monitors tonight, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court decision and affirmative action. Tonight, my guest is Paul Mullins. How you doing, Mr. Mullins?
What's going on, Carl?
Oh, I'm good, man. How are you going? How are you doing tonight?
I'm all right. What's up?
Okay. So here's the thing. You and I have talked about this. I've asked you to come and talk about this tonight because we were going to talk about women cheating on their husbands. That was going to be our topic tonight. But then the Supreme Court did a whammy. And there's one more day of the Supreme Court, right?
Right.
That's the bang, bang day. I think there's an LGBTQ case up
They're
there,
in
right?
trouble.
Yeah, they're okay. You think they're in trouble?
They
Okay.
did. Look, well, I'll let you start, and then I'll give my opinion. But yeah, people are in trouble.
Okay, yeah. Some people in trouble. Okay, so here's the deal. So the Supreme Court today, so we're asking the question tonight. The Supreme Court kills affirmative action, or did it? And I'm going to take the first lead on this. For those of you who don't know, the Supreme Court decided a case today. And that case was a case that was brought against Harvard University, and the University of North Carolina. And the whole purpose of the lawsuit was that there was at least one plaintiff was of Asian descent. He was an Asian American, and he claimed that an African American, male or female, was allowed to be admitted into Harvard University instead of him. He claims also that his qualifications exceeded the qualifications, the academic qualifications of the African American. Not by much, because it's Harvard, right? So everybody's qualified. If Harvard wants you, if Harvard invites you, then you're probably qualified. So it's not I got 99 points and he got 120. It's not like that. If Harvard accepts you, Harvard accepts you. But his issue was that he apparently was told, and it was true, that Harvard had a policy that they, for admissions, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, for admissions, 50% of the minority students, I hate that word, 50% of the students of color will be African American in terms of admissions. And the other 50% would be other people of color groups, right? So there's all kinds of things here. So I'm going to bring Paul back in. We're going to bring Paul back in. And Paul, there's all kinds of issues with this. And I will tell you, there is one comment that I see so far, and we're going to talk about this because this is something that you and I talked about because the case mentioned Board versus Brown versus Board of Education. And one of our comments already that we have yet to show it, but we will, is we are also concerned with how it will impact supplier diversity. So there's some question about all of these diversity and inclusion and all of these departments that corporations have. What does that really mean? And the institution has. But before you comment, this is our question tonight. The Supreme Court kills affirmative action, or did it? Because all the networks are running this suggestion that affirmative action is dead.
Well,
is it dead?
With the exception of Fox News, I'm sure they are celebrating, saying that it's like Ted Cruz said, it's something that all America should celebrate. But going back to your point, I did read the opinion's 250, 260 pages, and I read the first beginning because half of the opinion is the dissent. So half of the opinion is the people for it, the other half is the dissenting justices. And I didn't get a chance to read the dissent, but apparently at Harvard they have they use race as a basis, not the sole basis, but they use race as a basis for allowing people to get past certain steps in the process. It's like at the beginning of the opinion, you can read how the process works. It's like a 5-step process. I could be wrong. It could be 4 steps or 6 or 3. But it's a 5-step process you go through where at each stage you have to clear a hurdle. So they said that they have 60,000, maybe 40 to 60,000 applicants, but they only accept 2,000. So if you could imagine a room with 60,000 applications and you've got to narrow that down to 2,000, well, they've got to have a process to do that, and they send the applications through stage after stage after stage. Well, in each stage, they consider if you're Black or Latino a factor that should help you advance. And that's really what this opinion is getting to. It's saying, well, that can no longer be a factor, blah, blah, blah. But so how does a school, if you take race out of it and you clear the slate with race and you pretend like race isn't an issue, how does a school ensure that it's a new freshman class is a diverse freshman class? Because at the end of the day, it's not against public policy to have a college campus with a diverse class. So my opinion, even though you say, no, it's not going to kill affirmative action, but it's a major step backwards. And all you have to do is look at the people celebrating it. The people celebrating it are the people who never wanted it to be a part of the selection process because it disadvantages the rich. It disadvantages the well-off. It disadvantages, what we consider white people with white privilege. It disadvantages them because and I talked to you about this, Carl, if I was a white person or a well-off Black person and I was, had a lot of money and I had a lot of influence, I don't need a boost to help get into Harvard. Why should I need a boost? So now when my kid is on the low end of all the people in his peer group of rich kids, and he's on the low end. He now wants to take a kid who is not in the same position as him, not have the same background, not have the same advantages, maybe has more disadvantages, and say it's not fair. And so if you don't want to base it off somebody being black, white, which I read the opinion, I understand why they wrote it, but it's we'll get into the justification for it later, but I think it's a step backwards, no doubt about it, and it's real simple because before we didn't have affirmative action, how many people were getting into the better schools who were minority, black, or Hispanic? That's all you got to look at. And now you're saying that all of those barriers that were in the way 50 years ago are suddenly gone. A statistic that I saw earlier, and I hate to take all the time on your show, but a statistic I saw earlier, Carl, is it wasn't a statistic, it's a fact. When did we get emancipated? Let's say 1864, maybe, right? So that was 160 years ago. How long were black people slaves? Since 1605 when they first landed? So that's 250 years? So black people were slaves for 250 or more years, if whatever the math is from 1600 to now. And they've only been emancipated for 150, 160? And you're telling me that suddenly in that 150, 160 years, everything caught up? When for the first 100 years, you had Jim Crow laws and separate but equal and all those rules that kept us down. So really, you're talking in the last 50 years, the black America has caught up to white America with equality? I don't think so.
That's interesting. And you said a lot to be unpacked. So let me just say this, and I'm going to start with this. I'm going to give this brief 30 to 45 second introduction of affirmative action for the ignorant and the feared, okay? Affirmative action, the whole purpose behind affirmative action was to counter what corporations and what higher education institutions were doing. So back before affirmative action, if I qualified to get into, let's say, Harvard or Yale, basically Harvard or Yale, although they were getting government money, they were deciding that, we're not going to take any black students. Okay, let's start there. And Yale and Harvard are two institutions that are not the best examples because we know they took black students many, many years before when Jim Crow was
other colleges
rampant and boisterous in the South. But a higher education institution decided that they were not going to take African Americans, or they were going to take very, very small numbers of African Americans. And what happened was affirmative action comes along and says, hey, listen, we will give you an incentive, number one, to increase your population of African Americans. And again, I know the other of-color groups are taking advantage of this, but let's just keep this real. This was all because of what was happening to African Americans. The bottom line is that it came about only to equalize the opportunity. It was never designed, as the ignorance and the fear would suggest, it was never designed at all to say, here is an unqualified black student, and here's a most qualified white student, and we're going to take the unqualified black student so we can keep up with this, with our, quota or diversity numbers. That suggestion and that behavior in terms of how affirmative action policies were executed got so out of control that there are people on the Supreme Court right now that believes that affirmative action only discriminates against white people. And so I'm going to start off by saying this, that it's the ignorance and the fear that we have this decision today. Because if you look at the whole purpose behind affirmative action, the whole purpose behind affirmative action was to suggest, Paul, that if Paul Mullins is qualified to get into school like Yale with the same qualifications as a white person, then Paul Mullins should get in. You should not deny him access to the institution because of his color. And so then all this diversity stuff came, but it was never designed, if you will, such as Clarence Thomas' dissent, and we'll talk about that, but it was never designed to say, every white person believes, every white person at the institution, such as what Clarence Thomas was saying, right? He said in his dissent that it stigmatizes. His criticism of affirmative action for years has been that I was stigmatized because everybody at the institution I went to, it was either Columbia or Yale, they thought that
he was only there because he was black, right?
Because he was not qualified. And so I start off, I give you this introduction because it's important to understand the basis of the ignorance and the fear. If you believe that it was a law that discriminates against white people, then you're part of the ignorance and the fear.
Well, Carla,
now, and hold on, Paul, let me just finish up with this. And I say that because when the law got down to the point where universities and their legal counsel had to interpret it, that's where the problem started, right? That's where the problem started because then they began interpreting the law in a way that they thought based upon the ignorance and the fear. Now I'll start with that introduction.
Well, at the very beginning or near the beginning of the opinion, and I'll read it. The statement is made by the Chief Justice. Eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it, and the Equal Protection Clause we have accordingly held applies without regard to any differences of race, color, or nationality. Whether racial classification is used to further, they go on to talk about the structure of it, but basically they're saying that if both are not accorded the same protection, then it's not equal. So this is it's the same argument I had when I was growing up and I was in school and everybody thought that affirmative action meant that I didn't get a job, I didn't get a seat because they had to give it to a black person. And this is basically, it's basically the same. When they make this statement, they're saying the same thing you said, that basically white people matter too, basically. That white people's equal protection matters too, or in this case, Asian people. And I think that the reason, like you said, this was created was simply to give an equal opportunity. I don't have a doubt that even if Clarence Thomas was unqualified, guess what? Even if he wasn't qualified to be in Harvard, guess what? He graduated from Harvard, he got good grades, and he's now on the Supreme Court. Whether I like his opinions or not, he's on the Supreme Court. So it all comes down to, again, you have 40,000 applicants, and you've got to narrow it down to 2,000. You might want to have a diverse campus, and you should be allowed to put in safe spots for different groups of people. And this opinion is not saying you can't consider person's race, but it's saying you can't consider a person's race. Literally, in this opinion, Justice Roberts says, well, you can still use it for something else as long as you don't make race a determinative factor. How can it not be if ever in every stage? If you're gonna actually use it and weigh it and make it mean something, how can it not be part of a determinative factor? So yes, they're killing affirmative action, even though they're saying, oh, you can still use race, but you can't use race as if it means something. And that's
yeah. So, and that's really the whole issue here, right? I mean, the whole issue, for the most part, is that. Well, I lost my train of thought, Paul. So.
Well, I mean, going back to it again, I think, I've talked to you about this before. I don't have a problem with saving space for somebody that you may perceive as being unqualified. If they go to Harvard, graduate from Harvard, and become a success, that's better for the society as a whole. You don't want a situation, and I'm not saying this will happen, but you don't want a situation where the only people who get in Harvard are Asian kids. I mean, is that what Harvard is? It's just an Asian factory of sending out all the best and brightest Asians?
If you believe that Asians are as academically inclined,
I'm giving you an example of if you don't save space for different groups and you want a diverse campus and you just take the blinders off and you just don't even look at names and you look at numbers, you could potentially, presumably, you could get a class with excluding an entire section of a population. Right. Because again, the standards that are required to get in are different. If I went to school in Jefferson County, Kentucky, and I got the best education I could get based on my circumstance, I still may never measure up to a kid who grew up in, right outside of Boston, near Harvard or everything, and who had that formal private education, private teachers, the best education possible in high school. It doesn't matter how good how smart I am, how good I am, whatever my ability is, you're never going to find out because I did the best I could do in a small pond. And I don't think that it's wrong to take people from a small pond, put them in it, hold a spot for them, and let them see if they can rise to the challenge because they were given the opportunity. Now you're talking about if you take away affirmative action, people don't get that extra consideration for the opportunity. Now it's just like, well, you grew up in rural Kentucky, you didn't get much education, you did the best you could on the exams, but we only take 36s and you got a 34. And it's like, is that really what you think is best for the country? Because I don't.
But isn't that what causes the fear though? Because using your example, wouldn't you agree then that you're basing the decision to admit that student based upon race?
Well, it could be, it could be race or socioeconomics. But I think a school, when you have 40,000 applicants, they should be allowed to
base it on race
to help people, but not to exclude. They should be able to use it to help people, but not exclude. But then you run into the problem, if you're helping one person, then you got to be excluding somebody else.
Right. If you're benefiting one, then there's a detriment to another. And I think that was the basis for the whole
That was the basis of their.
So my position is exactly the opposite. My position, and I sort of agree with John Roberts to the extent that it could. No, listen, don't say wow yet. I agree with him only because when you look at the opinion basically makes the point that race cannot be the primary factor. That's really the whole decision here, is that you can consider race, but it cannot be the primary factor. And that's the reason why they say in this opinion, for all of you who have read the opinion or who have not read the opinion, that's the reason they say we didn't overrule the Grutta decision.
But they did.
Or the Bakke decision.
But they did.
And the Bakke and the Grutta decision, for those of you who don't know, was a decision that basically legalized affirmative action and said that affirmative action stood the test of scrutiny. We could talk about scrutiny, constitutional scrutiny, all night and give you a law school lesson on that, but we won't. But suffice it to say that the opinion is very technical in a sense. And to the extent that you have networks that are saying that it killed affirmative action, it really didn't.
It did.
Well, hold on a second. If institutions go back to the drawing board, I think they can get around this opinion. The only thing that the opinion is saying, as bad, and it is a bad opinion. I don't want anybody to think that I support the opinion. I would prefer not to have it, but I understand it. All they're saying is that don't do it based on race. But the problem with the way they say it is that they say it solely based upon this premise of fear and ignorance of how the law was supposed to have been executed because it was improperly executed, and the fear that there is an attack on the white student population. So, having said that, Paul, here's my question to you.
But these were Asian students.
No, I understand that these were Asian students, but that doesn't really make a difference. I can go on and on about that, but I'm not going to do that because last time you told me not to write the letter, I wrote the letter and I got in trouble. I can't get in trouble. The network is okay with me saying whatever. But anyway, but here's the thing, Paul. First of all, for those of you who are commenting, we're going to get to your comments in just a second because some of your comments are very, very interesting and we want to talk about them. And Paul, I want you to comment on some of these comments that we're hearing. But just getting back to the question that I want to pose to you is that we're in a different era now than we were 40, 50 years ago.
How so?
Okay, how so is because we have many, many more black business owners than we did. No, hold on 1 second. We have many, many more African Americans.
Why? Why do we have more?
Wait, I don't want to
affirmative action.
I don't want to go there yet. I mean, maybe it is affirmative action, but I don't want to go there yet. What I want to say to you is that we're in a different era than when affirmative action came into play, right? That was an era where if you were white and you did not hire or give the black potential employee or the black student an opportunity, then it was lost. So I'm going to take you back on a couple of scenarios. One is that we have so many more black billionaires today. We have so many more. Hold on one second, Paul. We have so many more black millionaires today. We have robust HBCUs today. Okay, so I pose the question to you: is this a double-edged sword?
No.
Why isn't it a double-edged sword?
I'm going to tell you.
No, hold on one second. Because if the Supreme Court is saying today that it's okay for you to not consider race, what about the HBCU schools who decide not to take white students?
Okay, great. But I know this.
No, don't say great.
No, I'm saying great. No, that's not a double-edged sword. The most successful people generally come from the most successful education and, sources. So
socioeconomic background.
Right.
So why not make it on socioeconomic background as opposed to race?
Let me finish. Because if you look at the people coming out of Harvard, okay, and you see out of the 46 presidents, 45 presidents we've had, most of them came from an Ivy League school. That tells me that my education at Louisville ain't gonna get me in the Ivy League, ain't gonna get me to be president. It could. Trump was president, but he's a rarity, and on top of that, his daddy was a billionaire. So if you don't have a Ivy League education, aspiring to be president is gonna put you behind. You're gonna start a race where everybody's already taking off running. So I'm saying going to the better schools gets you better opportunities. Going to MIT, okay, gets you a better opportunity to be, a NASA scientist, for instance, or a Tesla scientist. But whatever it is, getting the better education gives you the better opportunity. And so we as black people are running a race where the rest of the country generally got a head start. And because of affirmative action, we're able to catch up in the race. Now, the question becomes, when this first decision in Bakke and all the affirmative action cases came through, it was controversial back then. But the same institution, the Supreme Court, at that time, with a different makeup of people, thought that was fine. Affirmative action was fine. So 50 years later, 40 years later, a new group of people decides it's not fine. Just like they took back Roe versus Wade. What are they going to take back next? It really doesn't matter what we think about this opinion, how well it's written, the logic, the reasoning. What it basically comes down to is you have 9 people, and at the end of the day, they make the final decision based on how they feel. I don't believe anything that they put in there has to even matter, because they could write, we don't want affirmative action because we don't fucking want it, and nobody can do anything. There's nobody to appeal it to. There's nobody to reason with. That's it. So they can give me all the reasoning they want. It doesn't matter. What it boils down to is this is what they wanted to do. And I don't think it's right, and I can disagree with them, but I can't do anything about it because they're the final arbiters. I believe that affirmative action helped disadvantaged people. Now, if you want to change affirmative action to meaning if you're black and socioeconomically disadvantaged, I'm okay with that. You can't be a rich black person and claim you need affirmative action, right? When it comes to school administration, school admissions, you can't be a millionaire son who's black, Jay-Z's son, and claim you're socioeconomically disadvantaged and you should get a leg up in an admission. No, I don't agree with that. But that's not what this says. I still believe in people with a background where they're disadvantaged should still get a leg up. They should still hold spots for these people because, Carl, as you know, it doesn't matter what your test scores are or how you got to the school. Once you get into school, you can perform better than anybody else in the school. And it's happened. It's been proven. I know a friend who I went to law school with who was white, who had to take an exam just to get into law school. They weren't going to let him in. His test scores were really bad, and he got 3rd in the class at the end of the day. So he scored better than everybody else who got so much better scores, and he's from rural Kentucky. He got in school and kicked everybody's ass. Yeah. So I don't think it matters with the admissions process. I think they should be allowed to take a diverse group of people.
You know, I mean, because if you come from a different socioeconomic background, that's diverse too. If all the people there are privileged kids, right? So, but I'm not sure if that's the correct narrative in terms of what I just heard you say. What I'm going to say is this: is that I think the whole purpose behind affirmative action was that there are black children who are disadvantaged, and they met all of the qualifications, right? I agree with you that there was a majority of black students that didn't meet the Harvard and the Yale qualifications back in the late 60s and the early 70s.
Well, that's what this opinion is saying, that when Harvard considered the students, they had a group of students who were on track A consideration, and they had the disadvantaged students, minorities, on a different track. Meaning, that's what the opinion says. It says in the first 10 pages, they were on a different track. Because if they had, and I'm making this up, but if the white kid's average score for a white kid applying to Harvard was like a 35, but the average score for a black kid was a 34, the consideration, well, he's black, so we're going to move him along in the process because he's still got a high score. That's what it says, and that's what was happening.
I agree with you.
And I don't have a problem with that.
I agree with you that that's what it says, but my problem is that is based on the premise of ignorance and fear, because that means that Harvard executed the whole purpose behind affirmative action incorrectly, and that's how we get to this result. No, I don't
think so.
I don't think it was. I think in some people's mind, it was designed to say, if you need a 10 to get into Harvard and you score a 2, that's what the article. That's what it says. First 10 pages. Based upon ignorance and fear. I agree.
But that might be the facts of the case.
No. Paul, it might be the facts of the case. Back in, all I'm saying is that a lot of this opinion emulates from the fact that there was this ignorance about how to execute affirmative action and this fear. But before we go any further, let's consider some of these comments. CC West, thanks for joining us. We are also concerned with how it will impact the supplier. People who are minority business who are supplying services. Okay, so you're talking about as far as where they have like when you apply for a city contract, they have to have a certain number of minority-owned business. Again, but that's what it is. I can't. But but we don't have to support it, Paul. So you can keep calling us something. Well, what's the word? What is the word you want to use? Call me what I am. I'm not a minority. What am I a minority? All right, black owned. I don't know. What do you want to call it? Well, I don't want to get caught up in the semantics because I don't want to. I don't want you to. You are a minority in this country. You're a minority. I'm not a minority because I'm not minor to anybody. Okay, that's not what the word means. The word means in the population, we represent 20 or less %. We are a minority of the population. I got no problem with using that word. Even on the NBA court? Not on basketball. Okay. So we're not minorities. You are a minority because you don't play basketball. No. I'm a minority to basketball. But anyway, but when we talk about race and minority, I don't like such a stereotype. It's not a stereotype. It's just that I don't like to be called something subservient to somebody else. Well, but see, here's the problem with terms. You can make up a word and you can label somebody a word, and because they put that negative connotation on a word is the reason why you don't like it. In other words, if you were called a minority and there was no negative connotation with it, you had no problem with it. But they can call you anything. They can call you a red coat. They can call you a black coat. If they put a negative connotation on it, you're not going to like it. If it's neutral, if they just call me an individual who's applying. That is too damn long to say that. That is too damn long. But let's get back on track. Okay. Let me get back on track with you and just say minority suppliers are black, mainly black-owned businesses. They are black-owned businesses that are basically contracted because there are all of these policies, diversity and inclusion policies. They don't call it affirmative action because affirmative action was a bad phrase. It developed it to be a very, very bad phrase. So now they call it diversity and inclusion. Right, but that's going to become negative too. Huh?
And that'll become negative too, and we'll have to change
Yeah.
it. That's why we used to be called Negroes,
But-
then we got called
right,
Black,
right.
then we called African Americans.
Right.
Now we
I don't believe that's the same, but anyway.
Brown.
But so what she's asking is that how is it going to impact the diversity in the supply chain when it comes to minority suppliers? And Paul, just to nudge you a little bit, we talked about this earlier. We talked about when, a lot of people are not recognizing one thing about this opinion, that it is going to have a domino effect.
slippery slope.
It is going to have a domino effect. And 5 years from now, we're probably going to be back in a situation where the poor people in Eastern Kentucky don't get a special consideration. The black boy in West Louisville, in growing up in poverty, family, all of the things that affirmative action was designed to correct. Some of that is still existing today, and they're not going to get it. So all I'm saying is that what she's asking is, in terms of the minority supplier and diversity supplier, will these companies and will these governments get to a point where they will say, we don't have to comply with that.
Right.
We're just gonna.
So
if we've got 5 businesses bidding for the contract, and 3 of them are black, we don't have to feel bad that we don't accept the black ones.
I think it'll be worse for minority suppliers or black-owned businesses than it will be for emissions by far.
What do you think is going to happen to college admissions? Because you didn't answer my question about the HBCUs. What if HBCUs to say, hey, listen, HBCUs say today, hey, listen, the Supreme Court decision has come down, and because the Supreme Court decision has come down, guess what?
Carl,
we're not accepting any white people anymore.
Carl, I don't.
You don't see the opinion going that way.
I don't think that is what the Republican Party cares about. I don't think that is what white America cares about. White America, if
ignorant people don't think things.
Okay, but again, Carl, the people who want to get into Harvard aren't trying to get into Fisk. Period. End of discussion. We're talking about if you're sending the best and the brightest to the best schools, and I don't consider Fisk. I'm not against Fisk. I just don't consider on the same level as Harvard, Stanford, Yale. I just don't. And if you do, fine. But okay, great. But I don't.
What about Morehouse? What about Howard?
I don't.
You just don't. Okay.
Howard's a good school, but I don't consider Harvard.
What about? Was you really putting your foot in your mouth now?
Am I? Okay, I'm saying. I'm saying.
You went to UK because you thought UK was just this super school, and you go to UK, you're gonna get a job.
It's not. No, I would have gone to Harvard over UK. It's a no-brainer. Okay. And I'm saying if I put Harvard, if I put
you on the spot, man, how can you say Fisk is not on the same level
as Harvard?
As
I don't think that's a stretch.
I mean,
I don't think that's a stretch.
I think it's a matter of perception, Paul.
Whose perception? I've been to Fisk. I've been to Fisk. I've been to Fisk.
Did you study at Fisk?
No, I did not.
Okay, well that's different. I bet. Anyway, we can go on and on, but y'all know.
I picked a random school.
Right? This man. But anyway, let's get back to our comment.
Oh, wait, hold on. What about y'all know what the problem is? What's the problem?
Because he's not HBCU.
What difference does that make?
It's a good thing for the black community. Now we can get back to investing in our HBCU.
Oh, well,
that's what Ragnar says.
So Harvard's endowment probably has more money to supply their students with educational funding than what school did you go to, Carl?
I went to Kentucky State.
Kentucky State. Then Kentucky State has for 100 years.
Okay,
that makes a difference. Endowments.
Okay, hold on one second.
Funds.
These processes are used for workforce pipelines, healthcare, even federal funding. How does this impact the overall ecosystem? Back at this comment, these processes are used for workforce pipelines, healthcare, even federal funding. How does this impact the overall ecosystem?
I think that once people say, well, you can't have affirmative action in admissions, it's going to be a slippery slope, and they can easily claim, well, we don't have to do affirmative action, and there'll be new challenges. If the city says we only accept a certain number of applications and we got to have some minority participation, because they have that here now in the city of Louisville, and they challenge that, they'll use the same reasoning in some kind of court. And now all the minority-owned construction companies, minority-owned businesses, now they'll be at a slight disadvantage. Now, the other option is you can just outcompete everybody, but You don't have the same advantages built in that somebody has had when they got a 160-year head start on you.
Paul,
you don't have it.
No, I mean, I got it. I got you. Let me just pose this question to you. So again, let's talk about Tyler Perry Studios.
Okay. He won't be affected. He's already above the curve.
Listen to me, Paul. Just listen to my question. We're talking about Tyler Perry Studios.
Mm-hmm.
So Tyler Perry Studios, black-owned, black billionaire. What if he decides that he's not hiring white people anymore? Just because of this decision. My question to you is that isn't that the net effect of this decision?
Carl, what?
No, Paul, don't ask.
I'm trying to answer the question.
I want you to answer the question.
Go ahead.
Ever bring your cell phone to the studio?
Well, I did.
You keep telling these students that when they come in here. There's some students touring in Louisville, and some of them are in the audience. I wish we could hear an applause, but anyway. But listen, Paul, my question is very basic because I really do believe that if you believe that this decision has a domino effect, this is part of the domino effect. And what the domino effect is that what if Tyler Perry, and I'm just using Tyler Perry, I'm not using anybody else. Tyler Perry owns a big studio lot, almost bigger than Warner Brothers in the state of Georgia. What if he decides that I'm black owned, I'm not going to hire any white folks? What if HBCUs, again, I asked this question, decide we're not going to take in any white students because this decision says that we don't have a detriment before. And HBCUs are really not a good example except Fisk, because Fisk is private. But I'm just saying, again, this doesn't affect private schools. But I'm just asking you, is the net effect of this that Tyler Perry can now stop hiring white folks?
You want me to answer that question
honestly?
Because I can't answer that question without giving you some other information.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not a question of, okay, fine. Tyler Perry says I ain't hiring white people. Do you think, for an instant, that Hollywood's going to be like, oh my God, we're going to lose money? No. But you know what? If Hollywood said we're not hiring black actors, all of y'all black actors go work for Tyler Perry. Do the black people lose? Hell yes. So no, I don't want to equate this to Tyler Perry. Well, he can turn around and do the same thing. Well, Fisk, well, they can turn around and do the same thing. Well, Moorhead, they can turn around. It's not the same. It's like Hollywood banning all black people compared to Tyler Perry banning all white people. Not even close. Not even close. All the money that's being made has to be shared with Hollywood. Because you're not going to make money as Tyler Perry making your own little independent films without Hollywood. So quit trying to be the best black man in an all-black universe. That is small thinking, and we need to not think that way. We need to think, I want to be on a level playing field with the rest of the country. I don't want to be the best black person who's the best black lawyer, the best black businessman, the best black doctor. I want to be able to compete to be the best doctor. And you can't do that unless you go to the best schools. And that's my point. Yes, it's going to set us back. You can't be the best black contractor if you only do business with black people. Because we only represent 20% of the population. And if your business is limited to 20% of the population, you're missing out on 80% of the money. And it's just that simple. So do I think affirmative action is necessary? Maybe today, race relations are a lot different than they were 50 years ago, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that certain parameters and protections should be kept in place. And, as quickly as we can undo Roe versus Wade and go backwards, as quickly as we can undo affirmative action and go backwards, we can go backwards just as fast. So what happened before Roe versus Wade? People were getting illegal surgeries. Is that going to start happening again? Probably. What happened before affirmative action? Black people, first of all, if you look at the unemployment rate, while they say it's 5%, it's always black people have a higher unemployment rate, right? Why do you think that is? You think we're just all lazy and shiftless and don't want jobs? Or you think it's just harder for us to get jobs? What is it? Is it because people generally say, don't give black people the job because they have stereotypes about how they might be in the workforce? I mean, whatever it is, affirmative action definitely needs to be in place to get us better opportunities at education. And again, Carl, it goes back to what I said before. It doesn't really matter about these test scores because if you can get a kid into school, he can become better than you thought he was going to be based off his original test scores. Some people get into school because they had great grades and were expected to do well and don't make it, right? Some people barely get into school and become top players at the school. So again, that's why you need affirmative action, because people come from different backgrounds. They come from different opportunities, different advantages, different abilities, and you need to serve space to have a diverse campus to make sure everybody's included. If you present it in a way where you're not going to consider race as a factor, and then you're assuming that everybody's equal. Well, let me let you in on a little secret. It's mathematics. If there are 80% of your applicants, and I don't know if that's the number, but if 80% of your applicants are white, then that means necessarily just doing math that out of that 80%, you're going to have a higher number of people with better test scores. 100 black people with perfect scores. So now you got 500 people. And they say, well, we only have room to accept 400 people in the whole school. You're going to give it to all 400 white people who scored perfect scores because you got more of them with perfect scores? It's just numbers. You have to save space because it's just numbers. All right, what's in the comments?
Black culture runs the world. Why not give more blacks the chance to make money working black owners? And what's your comment to that? And he says most of the greatest blacks in the history of our country came from HBCUs. If we invest into them now, they can be on the same level.
So do you want two countries? You want a country where all black people go to all black schools and all white people go to all white schools? Because we had that. What was that called, Carl? Separate but equal. Didn't work out for us.
He sounds like he would tell Master that we was planning on running y'all. He wants us to be happy in Master House.
Okay.
That's you, Carl.
No, I hear what he's saying, but people don't know their history. All the black people go to the black schools. All the white people go to the white schools. Go ask your grandmother, whoever that commenter was. They remember a time when all black people went to black schools and all white people went to white schools. It doesn't work out. I hate to say it. It doesn't work out.
You're just saying it absolutely doesn't work out.
No, because you don't have a population where you only represent 20% of the population. What that means is you only have access to 20% of the wealth. So why would you want to limit yourself to that? In other words, if they had it their way and black people only dealt with black people and white people only dealt with white people, if you had it your way, you would only have access to 20% of the economy. Why would you want that? Why would you want to have access to only 20% of the economy? I mean, it all sounds good as a platitude. Oh, put more money back into the black institutions. It all sounds good as a platitude. But if you really think about what you're saying black people should only go to black schools and white people should only go to white schools. That's what you're saying.
The opinion is saying?
No, that's not what that's not what the opinion's saying.
No, I understand that, but isn't that what the opinion can lead to?
Yes, that's why I'm opposed to it. And it's not a good thing for black people, regardless of what they think about, well, we can just turn around and invest in black-owned schools. Great. So let's just play this out. All black people support black-owned schools, and all these schools get more money than they ever got. Okay? Are they going to get as much money as Harvard? Are they going to get as much money as Yale? Are they going to get as much money as Stanford, Florida State University? Are they going to get as much money as those universities? If the answer is no, what is the freaking point of making that comment? Did that work out for the American Indians, Carl? They got their own land. They got their own universities. They got their own reservations. Did it work out for them? Did it work out for them?
No. No, it didn't. But here's the thing, Paul. My bigger concern here is that, one, this is a bad opinion because we half the lawyers we practice with will tell you that they benefited from affirmative action. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand what my position is.
I benefited. I don't even know if I did or not. I assume I did.
I don't know if I benefited.
I think I benefited because I went to UK and there was 24,000 students. There was 800 black people.
Right.
I think I benefited.
I think whether you benefited depends upon whether you agree with the perception of how the affirmative action laws should have been executed. And that's the problem. And I think that's the point I continue to make. And
if I got into UK because I was black, I don't care. I'm happy. I got to where I am. I got to school. Just because I was black, I didn't get A's. I didn't get A's. I didn't get the grades that I got just because I was black. If I got there because I was black, when I got there, I took advantage of the opportunity, and that's the only thing that affirmative action stood for. Give me the opportunity so I can show you that I can do it. And what I wanted to be is I wanted to be a lawyer. And I knew that when I went into school, I worked hard for it. I got there, but I got the opportunity now. If they took away the opportunity at UK, if they took away the opportunity at U of L, if they took away the opportunity at all the other schools, and I had to go to a historically black college, I would have went. But at the end of the day, that's the school I wanted to go to, and I got to go there. And I met a lot of people.
Sports run the college where, hold on a second, Paul, all the black athletes would bring big dollars to HBCUs if all blacks went to HBCUs.
Oh, God. Is that it at the end of the day? Is that it at the end? Is that what black people are all about? That's all we can do is play basketball and play football? Is that what black people are about? You know what? What percentage of the population is an athlete? About 1%? What about the other 99% of black people, man? Come on. Come on. It's 14 people.
They probably make 40%.
It's 14 people on a basketball team.
I want you to.
What about the other? How many black students are there at any college campus? There's 800.
Ragnar, you get all excited.
There's 800 of us at UK.
Here's something
Now you're talking about they only got to accept 14 black people?
Affirmative actions allow us to get in the door. You agree with that?
Right, 100%.
Their whole point was to basically get rid of what they perceive to be affirmative action. That was the whole purpose today. That's why this opinion sounds and reads so inconsistent. You agree, right? There's some
I think it reads consistent for somebody for a chant from.
But you said earlier, Paul. Hold on. Let's just stay on track here. You said earlier that they said they were not overruling Grutter as well as Bakke, but in fact, that's exactly what they did, right? Yeah. So that's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking about that point there. So the inconsistencies in this opinion obviously causes some problems, and to me, that is indicative of the fact that what their goal was to get rid of affirmative action because all of these conservative justices on there, which by the way, Amy Coney Barrett has, children of color that she adopted. So I wonder how this is going to work out for them. If you believe,
but she's beyond the group that affirmative action is supposed to protect. So to her, it doesn't matter.
Paul, but what you're saying is you're talking about an socioeconomic issue, and I agree with you on that. But that's not the end of the story. I don't agree that every rich black person is going to get into Harvard despite this decision. I don't agree with that. I believe that every rich black person is going to get into Harvard or Yale because their parents probably are graduates and their parents probably are donating a lot of money. You and I know
their parents who probably got accepted through affirmative action.
Well, but
maybe
so. But what I'm saying is that let me just make this point. Affirmative action also came about because there was also a culture at a lot of these universities where if you were not a big booster back in the late 60s and the early 70s, then your kid, even if your kid has substandard qualifications, right? They would not get in. But I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. If your kid was substandard and otherwise would not have gotten in, but your father was a booster and a big financial donor to the institution, then your kid got in. The problem with the late 60s and the early 70s is that there were not a lot of blacks like that.
Wait. You think there's a lot of blacks like that now? Is that what you're claiming?
Oh yeah, I think there's some.
When you say some, though, again, look at the numbers. If you think some means 5 to 10, that ain't nothing compared to the other group who might have 50 to 100.
Right. But
that's not a comparable number.
Right. But let me deal with the premise that you're having. Let me just deal with this premise that I think is faulty on your part. And you're not on the camera because we're having some technical difficulties. So I apologize, people. I know y'all want to see Paul but right now. But listen, but here's the problem with that, Paul. You have to quit. I'm going to say something here. You have to quit disclosing your stereotypes about black folks.
I'm not disclosing
Yes,
stereotypes.
you are. Yes, you are, because you said you think that's a big number. Paul, let me tell you something about me.
We're only 20% of the population.
Listen, man, I don't have a lot of money, but I donated a lot to the University of Connecticut when my daughter was there. So when you assume that
non-HBCU,
UConn,
a non-HBCU,
a non-HBCU, well, that's where she went. And I'm just making a point to you that you can be an average wage earner, and you're not donating $1 million to Yale. You're not donating $5 or $10 million. You don't have a building named after you. But your suggestion that there's not a lot of black people who can be in that position.
No. My statement for there's not a lot of black people in that position is comparative to when you take 10% of a higher population, that can oftentimes be more than 50% of a smaller population. And the numbers are clear. We are less, maybe 19, 20% of the population. So we can't have a high number of anything. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. No matter how many people think every black person in America is rich, we still won't have more than the rest of America because they just have sheer more numbers. And that's the way it is.
They have sure more numbers of poor people too. Okay.
Right. But I'm saying if you have more numbers of people, the number of seats in Harvard is still locked at a certain number. So now if you've got 40,000 applicants, okay? If you've got 40,000 applicants, they may have less than 2,000 of the total applicants being black. That means if they wanted to fill up their school with black people, they probably couldn't anyway. So when you talk about sheer numbers, you have to save space, and I think affirmative action was correct. You have to save space for a minority population because the sheer numbers are just so small. You're drawing from a small. It's like if I fish in a pond that has one fish, it's going to take me forever to catch that one fish. But if I fish in a pond, that same pond that's got 10,000 fish, I'm going to catch a fish every minute. And so when you got a smaller pool of people to look to for that school, you're going to have a smaller number, and you may have to save back space just to meet that number. And that's all that they're doing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I understand where the Supreme Court says, basically, if you're not going to have discrimination against one group, you can't discriminate against another. I get that. So I think, and we talked about this, schools will simply just change, just like you changed the words of minority-owned business to minority suppliers or whatever, how they keep changing the names of...
No, diversity.
Yes. They'll just change the name of the group. It won't be race-based. It'll be something else, which still is race. And I think that'll be fine, but we'll see. Because all it takes is for a new group of admissions counselors who feel like, Republicans, it's a great day for America. I ain't got to accept these black folks no more. And then you won't have it. That's all it takes.
Let me ask you this.
All it takes.
Let me ask you this last question.
Do you agree with that?
Wrapping up.
Do you agree with that? That all it takes is to get a new group of admissions counselors for Harvard to say, well, we ain't got to take these black folks no more. We ain't taking them.
I think the whole problem with affirmative action has always been with admission counselors. I don't think that anybody bears the blunt of it. We as lawyers suffer every day, and we're going to suffer because new laws went into effect today here in Kentucky. We suffer every day with the shit that legislatures do, and then we try to put it, we try to execute the law, and it gets very, very quirky, right?
Well,
right? No, hold on.
Answer my question, though. Do you think that it could go just as quickly as they ruled on this? Do you think that?
Can,
yes.
Because here's the thing. Listen, and I answered your question, actually. Admission counselors were the problem. Interpreting affirmative action to mean that you have to exclude one group to include another group. I have always believed that premise was always incorrect. So when you have another set of admissions counselors, if they come in and try to continue to effectuate the same goal that the Supreme Court is now calling discriminatory, that's a problem. But if they decide to be a little bit more creative, Paul, when I say a little bit more creative, if they decide to be a little bit more creative, listen, there are so many ways that you can find out. If all you want to do, for instance, is find out whether this candidate is black or white, okay, it's not really that difficult. You invite everybody to the campus. And if you want, because if your goal is to actually do that, but understand the Supreme Court in this decision did not say that race could not be a factor.
But here's the problem. The fact that they struck it down and said that in this case race was a factor and we found it unconstitutional, it leaves room for new admissions counselor at Harvard, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but 20, 30 years from now to be like, well, we're not going to consider race at all. And if we don't get no black people in, we just don't get none in. And is that right? Is the question. Is that right? No, because then we're back to 1970 where we aren't even getting the opportunity to be in that school, and people will say, well, we can't consider your race as a factor, and if you want to get into school, you just need to perform better. And that's perfectly fine to say if the playing field were even, and it's not. So when you concede that they should get rid of affirmative action or that they misapplied it, then it's almost like conceding that the playing field is now even, and it's not.
No, the playing field is absolutely not even. Okay, there's no question that the playing field is not even.
And again, it may be even for me. It may be even for me and your kids because where we are now.
But Paul,
but I didn't. But hold on. Because I didn't. Because but it was a race. It was a race issue when I was growing up. Because I grew up where my father worked at the Penn Dentist Club and got called nigger all the time as a waiter. Okay, I knew that. I got called the N-word riding my bike down the street, believe it or not. I grew up in the East End. You grew up in the West End. I knew what it was like to know who I was, even though you don't think I did. And I'm just saying, my parents didn't have the opportunities that I had. My mom didn't graduate from high school. My dad worked at a club, at the Penn Dentist Club, and you know the reputation of Penn Dentist Club, right? And that's where he worked because that's where he had to work. And so then I come out and I get an opportunity to go to UK. My sister's the first person to go to college in my family to get that opportunity. And I'm the second person to go to college because I got that opportunity. And maybe my grades, maybe my test scores, you might look at them and say, well, they weren't as good as Joe Blow.
But what if they weren't?
Hold on, but what if they weren't? And what if I were? I don't know, but I'm saying
if they were,
I'm saying to you, I'm saying
you don't believe you would have gotten in.
I don't know, and I'm saying I don't know, and I don't care. What I'm saying is, if I got in because I was black and I got just enough that they saved a spot for me, not because my grades were certainly good enough to get in UK, but I'm saying to get in UK and get a full scholarship, whereas I know that with the scores that I got, if I were white, I would have needed 4 points more on my ACT. I knew that. So yes, I was for affirmative action. But because of that, I've been able to provide my children with a better life than my parents had. And that's how you move the population up. You don't just say, well, we'll just stay and invest in black businesses who didn't have shit back when my parents were growing up, who didn't have a whole lot. Yeah, you had some rich black folks, but it wasn't like 50 of them at one restaurant at one time, where you might see that in New York City. So no, it's not even. And so you can't sit here and compare that because, somebody got a test score that wasn't as good as somebody else who came from a different background, that it all of a sudden, that don't mean nothing. No, you still need to consider race unless you can tell us that the playing field's now even. And they didn't address that.
Yeah, Paul, but I know you're arguing that race should still be a factor. And what I'm saying is that I agree with you. I think the Supreme Court said it's okay to still make race a factor. I don't know what they really meant.
They said race. It's actually in the opinion, but they used the word. In this case, race was the determining factor. So they struck down race as the determining factor. But again, the process that they used was if you were a minority, they used that as a basis to help move you forward in the process. Didn't mean you were automatically accepted, moved you forward in the process. If they had said we saved a spot for 14 black folks and we only going to have 14 black folks and 14 black folks in the class, so they had to pick somebody who didn't ordinarily qualify, that's a kind of a problem. But again, I don't have a problem with it, but that's kind of a problem. But in this case, what they did was if you were black, they considered that a factor and they advanced you forward. So tell me how you can if you're going to base anything off race, how can race not be a determining factor if you're going to consider somebody's race? The minute you consider somebody's race, it's a determining factor. So that's a hollow statement that they made.
Right, I get that. But again, anything that is based on ignorance and fear is always going to come out very, very convoluted.
Well, I disagree with the fact that you say it's based on ignorance and fear. It's based on an agenda that they've had for 50 years, and that is to undo black equality.
No, Paul, that's not what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm talking. I'm talking about how people perceive affirmative action today, based upon how admissions counselors decided to execute it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. What I'm saying is that I believe that we definitely still need affirmative action. The issue that I have is that we have, as a society, caused the perception of what affirmative action to be so awkward because it was poorly executed. And when I say poorly executed, no, let me just finish. When I say poorly executed, I am specifically talking about the schools like University of North Carolina and Harvard that believe that affirmative action clearly meant exclude a more qualified person, i.e. a white person, and include a black person.
That's not,
hold on,
that's not what the opinion says.
I know that's not, Paul,
I'm
not talking about the opinion now.
Right, but that's not
what I'm saying is, I've said it 5 times.
You said 6.
I'm going to say it one more time. That the problem here is ignorance and fear because people are ignorant and they have developed fear about what affirmative action was designed to do. It was not designed to exclude a certain race of people and include, hold on, Paul, let me finish, and include another race of people.
Why do you think that? I mean, don't shy away from that logic because that is absolutely true. If you accept somebody and you advance them through a process because they're black, and you say that's a factor, even if it's not the determining factor, even if it's just one factor out of 5, if it's a factor, then you're excluding someone else Paul, from that process for the opposite reason.
If you read the case, and I know you did, if you read the case,
I'm just saying, don't be afraid of that fact.
No. Listen,
I don't have a problem
with anything. I'm just saying that, listen, if you read the case talks about passing constitutional scrutiny.
Right.
And it did not, make that rule obsolete. It said that the way Harvard and the way University of North Carolina does it just doesn't pass constitutional scrutiny.
Right, but it did 50 years ago. 50 years ago, it passed constitutional scrutiny. Now that we got a new group of people, it doesn't pass. And all I'm saying is that's all. Like I said, they could have wrote an opinion that said we want it to be this way because we do. Don't give me this constitutional scrutiny argument because 50 years ago it passed it, and now the same case doesn't pass it.
Listen,
so I don't want to hear that.
No, listen, I agree with you. What I'm saying is that there is a perception of affirmative action today that is completely incorrect, in my opinion. Okay? You suffer the stigmatization similar to, I'm assuming, Clarence Thomas, who said that you felt that sometimes y'all felt like that your colleagues felt that you didn't belong and you were only there because of the color of your skin. And I'm sure that there were probably some of my colleagues that felt the same way. But Paul, let me finish to make my statement, because every time I make this statement, you still talk completely opposite of this point.
Because it don't make sense.
The point is, well, you don't think it makes sense, but I think it makes perfect sense that the problem with affirmative action, not a problem for people in general, but the problem with why we find ourselves in a position where a great deal of our population is ignorant to what affirmative action is, because most 90% of the people in this country will listen to what you tell them the rule says as opposed to actually read the rule. So all of those 90% of the people that never read it, they assumed, based upon somebody else's interpretation, that this is the way it was supposed to have been executed. So they executed it that way, excluded people and included others. Hold on, let me just finish, Paul. And that is the source of the problem. All I'm saying is that you can still execute an affirmative action plan without excluding other people.
I disagree.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. Anytime you include somebody where there's a limited number of seats, you're going to exclude somebody. If you take race out of the situation and you exclude people based on test scores and you say you must have a 36, you've just excluded anybody with a 35. So in this situation, you've excluded them. Okay. If 36 is the only thing except
happens every day.
Listen to I'm answering your question.
No. UK.
Do you want to?
Okay, hold on a second. I'm just gonna say this, and I'm gonna let you talk. UK has 200. Let's say the UK has 5,000 freshmen, 8,000 freshman slots this year.
They usually don't, but go ahead.
Okay, let's say it's 8,000. 8,000 freshman slots. You have 20,000 freshmen apply.
Okay.
Okay, some people are going to be excluded.
Correct. So when you start giving reasons to exclude people, and one of them is race, you are excluding people based on race. So I don't want to dance around and say it's executed wrong. There's no other way to say it. If I exclude somebody and I include somebody else because of
sometimes they don't, Paul.
let me say this. I'm just saying practically, if I say I'm going to include somebody because of this factor, I could say I'm going to include people because they're white. That means I'm excluding people because they're black. I'm not going to shy away from that about affirmative action. That's exactly right. It does exclude people. But what I'm saying is I'm okay with it. It's right. It's the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do when they initially said affirmative action was okay. It should be okay now, unless you're telling me the playing field is suddenly even.
Everything you're saying, I get it. I understand it. But I think that you are jumping from a wholly fractured premise.
What's the fractured premise, Carl?
Well, the fractured premise is that you believe that affirmative action can only work if you exclude others and include others.
Carl,
and I don't believe that.
Carl, we will have this argument in circles. When you include somebody, you are necessarily excluding somebody.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily on race. I totally agree with what you just said.
But that's what they were doing. They were holding spots for.
UK has 8,000 applicants. It has 8,000 spots and 10,000 applicants. Your theory, what you just said, that statement is entirely true. I get that. All I'm saying
what if UK has 2,000 spots, but they reserve 100 for black people? That means they're excluding white people.
Well, yeah, Paul, but
that's okay. I'm fine with that.
No, Paul. I know you're fine with that, but I'm just telling you that is what the Supreme Court said was the problem.
But that's what's going on. You saying it's improperly executed?
I totally agree with that part of the opinion that says that if the only determining factor is the color of somebody's skin, and you use that to include that person, while at the same time excluding somebody who is of a different color. Now, how do you deal with this scenario? One black man applies, another black man applies. You got to exclude one. You only have one spot left, and you chose this black man. Is there a problem with that?
Say it again.
Two black men apply. Somebody has to be excluded.
But you didn't use it based on race.
You had to use it based on race. Let me tell you why. Because you're only considering those two because they're black.
I don't understand what you.
Okay, I know you don't understand because you want.
You said you have. You said you
wanted to be so basic.
No. You said
a white student.
No. But if you have two spots and two black people are competing for the.
No. You have two spots. There's
only no other seats.
There's one more spot available, and you have two spots. You have narrowed it down to only two black people to choose from. One of them you have to.
Do you have any other applicants who've tried to get that spot besides the two black people?
I mean, I'm sure there were. But you want to know what their race is, right?
Because if you've narrowed the last two men down to them, you're only going to accept black people, and you excluded everybody else besides these two because these two are black. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, and that was my point. But anyway, last words.
All right, so imagine this scenario, because you don't see Native. When's the last time you met a Native American? Like 100% Native American.
100% Native American?
Yeah.
Probably about 3 years ago.
Okay, so we know that in these parts they're few and far between, correct? They just are. And
Kentucky's an Indian name. But okay.
Right. But
Tennessee's an Indian name.
But even with that, they're still few and far between. Okay, we see Mexicans, but those aren't Indians. All right, some people would say us black folks are the Indians, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
They say that at the barbershop, right?
They say that in a lot of places. But be that as it may, take this scenario. You have a Native American, okay, and the University of Louisville wants to offer that Native American the only slot that they have reserved for a Native American because they don't get any Native American applicants at all. So the minute they get a Native American applicant, they're like, we want this person to come to our school, okay? And we'll give him all the support he can because we want this Native American to succeed because we don't get very many Native Americans around these parts, especially applying to our colleges, okay? They have a spot reserved for him that no matter what the other applicants are, they really want this student. Do you think it's wrong for them to hold a spot like that for a Native American student?
I mean, with what being my background, you just asking me in general?
I'm just saying in general. You think it's good? You think it's good for the country and a good public policy?
I think it's good for the school. I think it's good for diversity. Yeah, I don't have a
This
problem
case just struck all that down. Thank you. That's the last word. Struck all that down.
Yeah, but
struck all that down. Forget black or white.
No, I
if you wanted to
that
reserve
part,
a spot
but
because
here's
you know
the thing.
that they're disadvantaged. You know that if there's gonna have to be white guilt over slavery, there's definitely gonna be some over the Indians. And I'm saying we don't even. It was so bad with them, we don't even see them anymore, right? We put them on their own. Right. We put them on their own reservation and told them y'all good, but they're not.
Ragnar says that we need to be on our own.
Yeah.
Our own schools and everything.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying.
What he said.
Well, go visit a Native American land and see how safe you feel.
I think it's
see how safe you feel.
Paul,
see how safe you feel.
I gotta protect you on this show, man. That's
see how safe.
Stereotypical. You think it's You think it's more dangerous than Chicago?
Oh! I've talked to people who say if you are not part of the tribe, do not go on that land without, an escort or permission.
That makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense. That's their tribe. The America gave them that land. Well, actually, gave them back their land.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I don't have a problem with that. But you sort of suggested that it's worse than the crime in Chicago.
No.
Okay.
Well, but as a black person, I could probably get away with walking through Chicago anywhere and feel a little safer. I could feel safer than walking through an Indian tribe. But I'm just saying that you and I thought I got you to agree that would be a good thing to accept a Native American to the University of Louisville.
I think it would be.
And this
I don't agree.
This strikes that down.
No, I don't agree.
You don't think so?
No, I don't agree.
That's what it literally just said. It literally just said you cannot do the scenario I gave you. You cannot do that. You cannot hold a spot for a Native American, okay? No matter how good the public policy would be, no matter how great it would be, no matter how much you want to give that person an opportunity, you cannot do it because of this case. And that's completely stupid.
That part of this case I don't agree with, but I maybe that's the part that I missed. What I understood the case generally to say was that listen, you cannot make race the determining factor.
I just gave you the scenario.
Hold on. You can consider race as an element of admission or criteria for admission. You can consider because who wants all black? Some people don't want all black campuses. Some people don't want all white campuses. Some people don't want all female campuses. Some people don't want all male campuses. So I get it. I don't perceive that I didn't understand the case to say that race can never be considered. And I think that's why they argue in that case. The justices argue in that case.
Right. Because it don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say you can consider race, but you really can't. Or you can't consider race, but you really can't. It doesn't make sense. Once you say the person is black, somebody on the admissions board will be like, testing. Are we considering as race? Because we can't consider.
Testing.
Did we go dead? What are y'all doing over there?
We're okay. Frank, I don't know why you can't hear me. I'm sorry, man. I don't know why you can't hear me.
Can everybody else see if everybody else can hear?
The meter's going off. I don't know what's going on.
All right.
Anyway, but we're ready to get out of here anyway. So.
But this case eliminates the ability for a university to do something that's good for the public policy.
No, I got you. Okay. All right. The name of the book is Evidence. It begins with evidence. Frank, I don't have that book in here with me again, but Next week on this show, Frank Clay is going to join me live here from Kansas City. Look out for the promo. We're going to have him on here, and he's going to talk about a memoir that he has written. The memoir is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to give anything away. I'm just going to wait until next week. Anyway, Paul, thanks for joining me tonight. It's just like last week. This is a show that we just don't have enough time to really talk about in detail. Because there's a lot of stuff about this opinion that you and I don't agree on. And a lot of your stereotypes.
I don't have any stereotypes.
A lot of your stereotypes. Yeah, you got stereotypes. Anyway, I'm Carl Price. This has been Conscious Fever here on ICE Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. My guest tonight has been Paul Mullins. I apologize that at the second half of the show we had some technical difficulties. We couldn't bring him completely back on camera. But you've seen him before. And we'll talk about that. The book is Evidence No One Could Ever Imagine. And Frank, I apologize for that because the book is out in another part of, it's not here in the studio. If it was here in the studio, I would be able to read it. But anyway, but I have read it. I want you to know that. Paul, when we were in law school, we read how many pages a night? Easily 1,000 pages a night.
I didn't read 1,000, but yeah, read a lot. I didn't read 1,000, but
I read 1,000. I read Constitution. You didn't your freshman year, your first year in law school?
A night? No, I didn't have 1,000 a night.
I mean, you didn't get assignments where you had constitutional law. I mean, Plessy versus Ferguson.
I'm thinking maybe 100 or
Brown
200.
versus Board of Education. I mean, the case today was 257
Right.
pages. A lot of those constitutional law cases were very long.
I don't remember reading 1,000.
Well, you cheated in law school. Maybe you were
what are you talking about?
Maybe you were one of those privileged
That's a defamation charge right there. You just said I cheated.
Because I'm saying it to you.
It's my
reputation. I
reputation.
said it to him, and but I'm just saying, anyway, let me just speak for myself. I read sometimes as many as 12 or 1,300 pages a night of cases, from the tort law cases, the constitutional law cases, the Fed tax law cases, the property law cases, only to get to one point that they were trying to make in that case. And that's the crazy thing about law school.
You sound like Wilt Chamberlain.
Any case, evidence no one could ever imagine. Oh no, there's another fella. Do you know about the football player?
No.
Player that is on trial in I think it's in Europe somewhere.
For what?
Well, for raping 2 women.
Oh.
Okay, and according to some of the evidence, when he raped one of the women, he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I done had sex with 10,000 women," and he's only like 28 years old.
So he's gonna catch Wilt. He's gonna catch Wilt.
He's gonna catch.
I was referring to.
He said he's already had sex.
I was thinking he was the Wilt. I think he was the Wilt Chamberlain of reading law cases. That's what I was saying.
Well, maybe I was, but I had to read those cases over and over again because they just didn't make sense to me. Just like everybody else, first year in law school, you pick up the book, you believe that it's going to tell you,
A equals B.
Mickey,
right.
No. The cat got into the hat, and the hat belonged to, or Curious George type reading. I know it wasn't going to be that simple, but I'm just saying.
You felt like you was going to know the rule after you read it, and then you read it, and you was like, what the hell?
And then you read the whole case, and you said, okay, what if she calls on me tomorrow? What if the professor calls on me tomorrow?
What the hell did I just read? What did I just read?
Colleges need to affirm that they will be fair and have inclusivity of minorities. If not, we need to take
Can I say something to that real quick? That was the purpose. That was the purpose. That was the purpose.
Our guest for next week.
That was the purpose of affirmative action.
To affirm they will be fair and have inclusivity of minorities. If not, we need to take action.
And that was the protection. That was the protection afforded by the affirmative action cases to make sure that colleges did that, as opposed to. You have a board now who does that because the U of L board now is fair, but then Governor Bevin comes in, wipes out the board. They're bringing in a new board, bringing in new staff, bringing new teachers, and they're like, no, we ain't going to do it like that. We're just going to have all white people.
Anyway, we are at the witching hour. I've got to travel to another county tomorrow for court, so I've got to get out of here. Anyway, this is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price, host. You've been listening to us on Conscious Fever Radio, Ice Entertainment, and watching us on Ice Entertainment Television. I will see you next week. Please join me with Frank Clay Jr. from Kansas City as we talk about his memoir, Evidence No One Could Ever Imagine. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, I mean, are we really going to rely on universities to do the right thing? Some of them will. Harvard probably will. Yale.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
I can't think of some southern school. Alabama. Shit. The only black folks that have in campus in Alabama will be the football players and their girlfriends.
Take us out.
You heard what I said?
I heard what you said. They heard what you said too, but okay.
The only people they'll have on their... The only people they'll have is...
Next one.
Football players.
I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord that I wake again. I wake again. I pray the Lord that I wake. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord that I wake again. I wake again. I pray the Lord that I wake.
She'll cause a scene. 4 cars deep, we'll come through on a late night. Chicken spot, wings and fries, we call that a day night. Lights on, so out, I don't have no stage fright. Knew that I was built for this forever, ever, ever.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
We ride bands, 10 times 10, all my friends, this for real.
I get enough of you. Bright sneakers on, getting ready for a flashback. Time keeps moving on, looking at you feeling like I could never get enough of you. And I could never get enough of you. I could never get enough of you.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh yes it is. Then I go to my brother. And I say, brother, help me please.
couldn't last for long. But now I think I'm able, Father, to carry on. And it's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it is, yes it is, yes it is. Said I know that a change is gonna come one day. I know a change gonna come.